First series in progress. So, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you're tuning in from tonight for this, our fifth seminar now in our International Perspectives on Corpus Technology for Language Learning online seminar series, hosted by the University of Queensland in Australia in collaboration with University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. And this week we welcome our first presenter from UNESP, Dr. Paula Pinto, who's going to be presenting a topic on bringing the UN Sustainable Development Goals and data-driven learning to class. So this is something that when I saw the abstract, I was like, okay, we've got UN Sustainable Development Goals on one hand, and then corpus linguistics and data-driven learning on the other hand. And I'm like, okay, well, these seem quite very different things. So how are we going to bring them together? And this is something that I'm really interested in finding out about. So just before we do that, as is customary with all kind of public gatherings in Australia, I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country in which the University of Queensland, i.e. me and UQ, acknowledges the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands, or the internet in this case, on which we meet. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country, recognizing their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. And as with Australia, Brazil also has its own unique indigenous cultures, which contribute enormously to Brazilian society and Brazilian way of life. So we'd also like to acknowledge their contributions within Brazilian and the wider context. So our speaker for today, as already mentioned, is Dr. Paula Taveres-Pinto, who's a lecturer at UNESP Brazil. She holds a master's and PhD degree in applied linguisticos. I think that whoever was doing the translation probably missed that part, but I think it sounds better to say applied linguisticos than applied linguistics. I love the sound of that. She developed part of her PhD studies at the University of Manchester and was a visiting scholar at the University of Surrey, UK, so she's quite familiar with how bad the weather is there. She's the general coordinator of the program Language Without Borders and nowadays coordinates the program of English language teaching assistance at UNESP. So without any further ado, we're going to welcome Dr. Pinto and hear how she's going to bring together these UN Sustainable Development Goals and data-driven learning. Let's begin our presentation.
Okay. Thank you so much, Peter. Let me see if I... Okay, I think everything is working, right? Okay, can you guys hear me? Is everything okay?
Yeah, we're good there.
Yes?
Okay, we can hear you and we can see your slides.
All right, so thank you so much for the presentation. I'd like to welcome my colleagues and everyone who is here today, and I hope you can take some examples on how to use data-driven learning and the theme of Sustainable Development Goals to your classes. So it's very nice to present in this online seminar series, and I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Peter Crosswaite for the invitation and for the partnership. Also, I'd like to thank my colleague, Adriane Orenho Tayano, and our postgraduate program of Linguistic Studies in São José do Rio Preto, our research group in Corpora, and the Global Strategy and Partnership Seed Funding Scheme for funding this series of webinars, as well as to CAPES, UNESP, CNPq, and FAPESP for funding some of the studies that I'm going to mention here. So I will start by presenting the campus where I work, which is in the northeast of the state of São Paulo. UNESP is a multi-campus university in 24 cities, as you can see here. And this is our campus. It used to be a monastery, so you can see the shape. And there is a garden in the middle, and I always like to start by talking about the campus where I work. So this talk will actually start by a program that we had in Brazil. At UNESP, it was delivered from the year 2017 to 2020, in which we had teacher training program related and linked to internationalization. In this program, we mapped the proficiency level of students in different universities in Brazil. And at UNESP, this was the result that we got. And I believe that we have in 2017 and 2019, that's the graph that represents the level, the proficiency level in English of students at UNESP. So as you can see, we had about 42% of students who were basic, A1 and A2 in the Common European Framework of Reference of Languages. We had around 30% of students who were intermediate. B2 here in yellow, we always had 23%, and we had few students, a small portion, like between 3 to 5% of students who were C1, who had C1 level. So this is pretty much how we get the students when they start their undergraduation courses at UNESP. And this program, which was called Languages Without Borders, was funded by the Ministry of Education and CAPES. And at UNESP, since we are a multi-campus university, we had students from different cities. So here we have an example of a student from Rosana campus and another one from Marília. And we offered English for academic purposes classes with the focus on reading. Is that okay? All right, so we had students from different courses who were taking English for academic purposes classes. And the focus of the classes were on reading comprehension, writing, listening, and speaking. This is what we usually see in EAP classes. But our research group also included some data-driven learning activities and corpus skills. So I'm going to show some of the examples and how we have been including data-driven learning to our classes. The studies that are important for this view and this introduction on data-driven learning to classes are the ones that I'm pointing here. In the sub-areas of data-driven learning, academic writing and corpora, corpus linguistics, and most recently studies on sustainable development goals and corpus linguistics, which is the focus of this talk today. So why the United Nations 2030 Agenda? First of all, because this is a document that has been built over the years in several conferences, and some of them I'm sure you have already heard of, the Agenda 21 in Rio, and the last one, Paris Agreement on Climate Change. We are soon going to have another conference on sustainable development goals. And this document was elaborated by the United Nations member states in 2015, and it's an urgent call for action by developed and developing countries in a global partnership. So the result were 17 sustainable development goals that you can see here. I'm sure that most of you have already seen this picture, in which we have the goals which are interconnected goals. So for example, here in one, we have no poverty, zero hunger, and then we have good health. And at UNESP, we have been in our area, in our post-graduation program, we have been working on research studies that focus on the Sustainable Development Goal 4, education. But there are others, as you can see, and they are all related to different focus. So for example, here we have partnership for the goals, peace, justice, and strong institutions. We have the themes of climate change and biodiversity as well involved. And these goals are related to the civil society, government, researchers, and stakeholders. So it's for everyone, right? So the topics and the themes related to the SDGs have always called my attention. And for example, here we have one text in which we can see how actions taken in one country can influence another country. So in this case, we have a text that we used in an English for academic purposes class, in which students would read this text and they had to point out the positive aspects and the negative aspects of sending peanuts to feed Haitian kids in Haiti, and how this in the end became a problem because as we can see in this article, Haiti is a country where peanut production is a huge source of livelihood for up to 500,000 people, especially women. And if you include the supply chains that process peanuts, so this would influence, like sending peanuts to malnourished Haitian school children in Haiti would become a problem. And this is an issue that we have to bring to our classes because students, especially university students, have to be aware of on how actions taken now in a global level can influence different countries and different economies, right? So we use this text, as I said, in English in an EAP class, in which students had to talk about the positive and the negative aspects. They should plan their points, have a thesis, and then present what they thought about the topic, making eye contact and talking to the audience. This was in 2018, and the Sustainable Development Goal agenda had already been set in 2015. So if I had known tools such as Voyant tools, maybe I would have included a warming up with a word cloud like this one, in which we can see, we can have a pretty much an idea on how the topic is going to be discussed. So we have peanuts, which is the main topic here. And then we have Haitian food, US, Haiti, and groups. So this could have been used as a warming up activity before reading the text. Also, as post-reading, we could also focus on word clusters and expressions such as, for example, here, food for thought, foreign agricultural services, partners in health. So you see, it's a tool that uses corpus in order to produce results like these two results here, right? And we can use that in our language classes. Now, I will be talking about BRACE, which is the Brazilian Academic Corpus of English, pretty soon. But basically, this is a corpus of research papers produced by Brazilian teams. And I wanted to take a look and see how Brazilian research groups were dealing with some of the topics related to the SDGs. And I got 117 hits for sustainability and 21 hits for poverty. So for sure they were discussing sustainability, but only few researchers were discussing poverty. Of course, this is a small corpus. There's almost 1 million words. So it's just to have an idea how it would be, right? So I took these concordance lines with poverty from Brace to class. This was an English 1 class, and we read the concordance line. So I wanted to bring the topic to our discussions in class. So we could see that Brazilian researchers were discussing poverty and as social marginalization and traditional communities such as quilombolas. We also have here a question: to what extent are these policies contributing to conserve biodiversity while reducing poverty? So it's a discussion over how the approach to tourism would help or not help traditional communities such as quilombolas, and also eco-villages in south of Brazil who focus on fighting poverty. So we talked about it, and we also talked about sustainability based on the concordance lines. So here we can, we have an idea on how the plantation of grapes were being discussed in one of the research articles. And we had sustainability and cost saving. And this last line here was an important line to be discussed, because we can see that it's saying, although the principles of sustainability have been progressively included in the Brazilian normative framework, progress in the implementation of these actions follows a slower course. So this article was taken from a 2018 issue. So we are still working on bringing sustainability to our reality, right? So in the end, we could see, based on the word sketch, that sustainability word sketch would be all the co-occurrences of search words such as sustainability with other words. So we had sustainability as concept, phenomenon, and cure. We had the discussion over coastal and sub-regional sustainability, so geographical point of view. The verbs used in the topics related to sustainability were insert and rethink, so positive way of discussing sustainability. And with poverty, we had quilombolas and eco-villages, so we have traditional and modern concepts of groups, traditional groups in Brazil, and the verbs used were fight and reduce. So this was also a way to bring the topic to class, and before reading the text, having an idea on how these topics are being discussed by researchers. Sorry. So here we have a corpus of reports. We selected the reports from 2018 and 2019 from the UN website. And we can see multi-terms, a list of multi-terms, which are really related to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have sustainable development, universal access, global food system, science diplomacy. We also have scientific knowledge, land degradation, global level, energy transition. So as we can see, we have a broad discussion over the SDGs, and we focus on global food. So students read the concordance lines, and then they went to the UN website to see how the Sustainable Development Goal 2, Zero Hunger, was being discussed in different countries. They read there are many short texts that can be used in language classes, also short videos. We watched them, we discussed them, and then they prepared their own texts about avoiding food waste in Brazil. This was a topic discussed in regional level, so we talked about how this topic is being dealt with in São José do Rio Preto, where we live, then in national level, and then they wrote their own text. So we have here, for example, valuing local products, seeds bank in Brazil, it's also possible, and Brazil hunger levels, right? There were 13 texts produced by this class. I have also used the SDGs with the translation course. I usually teach some of the corporate tools that can help translators in their practice. So here we have parallel concordances on coronavirus. So we could see how the students, the translation students, are working with this topic and which terms they have been selecting to translate these topics, in this case related to the SDG 3, good health and well-being, right? And we can also observe how they are developing their translational competencies. So we talk about bilingual competencies, cultural competencies, and translation competencies. Sorry. This study is being developed by Dr. Marcelo Freitas Lima and me. He is a professor of chemistry, so it's an interdisciplinary study on pesticide chemistry. Since he told me that his students were having some difficulty in reading texts related to this topic, so we should use and bring some texts on the topic, as well as writing their reports in English, because there is an unbalancing over the terms used in English and in Portuguese. So since 2016, we have been working in partnership. We have already published some papers on this topic, and recently we were selected on a call in which we should focus the SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, SDG 15, life on land, and also gender equality. So we are very happy with the result, and we are going to develop some digital glossaries with a university in Switzerland. And here we have Dr. Marcelo Lima talking about organophosphorus and organophosphate. And we are using the tool EntConc with the students of translation, so they were selecting the terms to be used, to be included in the bilingual glossary. So we have pesticide residues, pesticide management, pesticide chemistry, and other terms that we are going to include in this bilingual glossary. Now, back to BRACE, the Brazilian Academic Corpus of English. This corpus was selected to study, so that I could study how Brazilian research teams were using collocations, right? So by we, I'm saying Dr. Ana Frankenberg Garcia and Dr. Rees. We selected, we had a balanced corpus of research papers in different areas. And then we analyzed the collocations used by Brazilian research teams. And the result is that one of the collocations that is very common in Brazilian research papers is study, corroborate, and make analysis. It's another one. However, comparing the context, we could see in the Oxford Corpus of Academic English that international researchers usually use support and confirm studies instead of corroborate, right? So it's not a very frequent combination. Also, make analysis, we could see that in the OCAE, that performed, conducted, and applied analysis are more common collocations used by international researchers. On the other hand, some collocations that are common in the Oxford Corpus of Academic English, such as extensive use and qualitative study, which are similar to Portuguese, were not very frequent in the text produced by Brazilian researchers. So this was another result that we were surprised to see. As an example on how to deal with collocations, we offered in 2018 and 19 academic master classes at UNESP and at the Federal University in south of Brazil. So we participated in this call by the British Council, in which we had Dr. Ana Frankenberg Garcia and my colleagues, Dr. Ana Bocorni and Simone Sarmento, offering those academic master classes, in which we had a collaborative work between researchers and EAP teachers. In this case, we also had the participation of translators. So they learned how to use Corpora tools and data-driven learning to write their own research papers, in this case of the case of researchers, and for EAP and translators, and more specifically to EAP teachers, they used Corpus tools to produce teaching materials for their EAP classes. So they learn how to deal with academic writing, clusters, and collocations. One of the tools that we used in those workshops was Collocate. I'm just briefly going to mention, because I believe Dr. Ana Frankenberg is going to talk about that in her seminar. Sorry. So the researchers were using Collocate to improve their abstracts. So the tool works pretty much like what we see here. We click on Collocate, and then the collocations that are available in the database, which is a database with academic collocations selected by groups that deal with academic collocations and vocabulary. The collocations are highlighted here, underlined, and the researcher can use them. He will decide whether he wants to use them or not. So it's not a tool that is going to correct the text, but it's going to bring academic collocations and combinations that are usually used by international researchers. So the researcher will choose the collocation that he believes will be important to his text, right? So, and how this is how it looks like. We also used Scale in those workshops, which is an open source, and I'm sure that most of you have already heard of Scale, but here we have an example on how to search for a term, in this case, sustainability, and we have several examples. It's nice because researchers can confirm whether the term that they want to use is used in that context that they want to use or not. But we have also observed that researchers, they don't have problems with terms, because of course it's their area, but they have problems with, for example, prepositions, adverbs, adjectives, which adjectives would make their text look stronger, you know, and bring strength to their text. So Scale has been used by researchers for that case. They can also see verbs used with the query word as subject, object, and modifiers. So we have, you can see here that we have ecological, long-term, fiscal, campus, sustainability. So it's a nice tool to take a look and have a quick idea on how a term or a word is being used in that context. And in similar words, we have words that are used in the same context as the search word. In this case, we have productivity and governance, right? Stability, innovation. So it brings other words that can be used in researchers' texts. Now, during those workshops, we asked researchers to bring their own research papers and research papers from journals of impact in their own area, so that they could compile a specialized corpus to be used for term extraction and observation of patterns of language. However, recently we have come to know this tool here, this program, and Quarten by Anthony Lawrence, in which you can select the area of your study, and then you can quickly compile a specialized corpus in your area. So I used this tool, this program, to look for articles on sustainable development goal, and I selected these parts of research papers. I just wanted to have the text, so abstracts, introduction, material methods, results, and conclusions, right? And I selected 400 research papers from PLOS, which is an open platform of texts, of research articles. And I'm calling that SDG PLOS, right? And I have 2 million words in this corpus, and I could see which topics are being discussed by researchers nowadays related to the SDGs. Most of the terms here will point to health. So we have maternal health, we have food insecurity, child health, child mortality, topics related to health, but not only. We also have, for example, ocean health, which is health, but related to ocean. So I wanted to take a look on this term in the concordance lines. So here we have some concordance lines with ocean health. And one of them was pointing out to Brazil's ocean health. So I wanted to take a look on how this topic was being discussed by Brazilian researchers. So I'm going to show that I expanded the concordance line and I had a text, so that I could bring to the reading comprehension classes in EAP classes. So I organized some questions here. What is the Ocean Health Index framework? According to the excerpt, how were the score results of variability? Which terms and expressions related to biodiversity called your attention in the text, and how do you translate them into your native language? How does the author say there could be some improvements in Brazil? And how is the current situation of ocean health where you live? Research about it and make a brief presentation to your colleagues. So this is an example on how we have a topic and we can expand it we can take a look on concordance lines, see which one calls your attention, and then we can expand the text and use that in our language classes. So here we have an example on, we can have the whole text, or we can have just an excerpt of the text related to a specific topic, right? So here we have to improve Brazil's ocean health. This study suggests that future actions should focus on enhancing fisheries management, expanding marine protected areas, and monitoring coastal habitats. So it's a text that I can use, for example, in EAP classes for students of biology, right? Also, governance was a term that was very frequent in the SDG plus and frequent in the Brace corpus as well, right? And I used this excerpt here, this enlarged concordance line, to prepare another exercise in which we have the idea of hands-on and hands-off activity. So hands-on is when you take students to the lab, to the computer lab, so that they can explore the corpus that they are working on. Or, you know, the teacher, the instructor can bring a specialized text, a specialized corpus as well for them to explore. And hands-off is when the instructor or the researcher prepares the activity to bring to class, but students do not have to go to the computer lab, right? So again, working on the excerpt with governance, I used Versatex to prepare this exercise, and Versatex is I think it's a beautiful tool because it brings everything in different colors, and I am a visual learner, so for me it's really nice. In a reading comprehension class, it's nice because you have the different words here. So we have in red all the nouns, in blue the verbs, in pink the adjectives, the adverbs in green, right? And we can also have function words. We have the difference between content words and function words. And this, in my opinion, it's a wonderful way of introducing a topic and introducing language, right? Grammar and structure. So it's just an idea. And then when you click, oh, one thing that caught my attention is that I had selected one of the concordance lines with governance as the query word. However, when I inserted the excerpt, governance did not come up in the word cloud. So we have to choose also to test different excerpts if you want to talk about a specific topic. But conservation was the most frequent word in that excerpt. And here again, we have sentences with the words in different colors. You can also have a fill in the blank exercise, and then you can bring this exercise to your class. Oh, sorry guys about there's some noise here. You can bring filling the blank exercise to your class, or you can do that in the lab, right? You can ask students to play and see how the search word would be used in that context. So here we have conservation management, right? We have levels of civil society involving in conservation, long-term conservation success. Again, we have concordance lines with the topic that can be used for discussion in an EAP class, right? Now, this is an example of teaching material that we have been working on in our research group. So we translated, we are organizing some teaching materials based on Corpora, so data-driven learning, with this idea of hands-on and hands-off activity. So Corpora, if you have not heard, is a bilingual corpus with novels translated from Portuguese to English and the other way around, from English to Portuguese. So there are several authors, famous authors in Portuguese-speaking countries and English-speaking countries. And you can see how those novels were translated to English or the other way around, from English to Portuguese, right? So in this exercise, the students, in this case, secondary level students, will select expressions that are culturally marked and then related to the indigenous culture. And then they should select some terms in Portuguese, how the professional translator translated that into English, and the context as well. So this is based on a novel by José de Alencar, who is a famous Brazilian author. And his novel, Iracema, which is a novel about an indigenous woman called Iracema. This novel was translated in 1886 and in 2000, in the year 2000. And in the Handsoff version, we bring the excerpts, the parallel concordance. I underlined here the expressions, but of course, we are not going to have the underlined expressions in the exercise. So the student should, the idea here is selecting and discussing the culture. So we have, for example, Pajé, who is the spiritual main person in a tribe. And students will see how José de Alencar talked about this person, and also how it is in English, how the professional translated that to English. So it could be used in a language class, in an English class, or as an interdisciplinary class with the teachers of Portuguese, English, history, right? So it could be used as well in an interdisciplinary focus, right? And we have here the Guerreiro Calbi. Calbi is one of the main characters, who is the warrior. And after using this exercise, students will research a little bit more on how the indigenous culture is nowadays, and they will produce a website in English, which will discuss the indigenous culture. Right, so nowadays we have been working on DDL and teacher training programs. And we have been discussing on how to bring DDL to English classes in the state of São Paulo and in the state of Goiás. So we have just set this partnership with Dr. Peter Crosswaite, in which we are going to have a teacher training program based on the course, his open course that I'm going to show pretty soon, on DDL for academic writing. So the idea is introducing the idea on DDL based on his course, and then developing teaching activities based on the São Paulo and Goiás state curriculum to bring to class. And we are also working on corpus skills for teachers and learners, because as we all know, it's not working with Corpora and DGL is not something that it's very simple, you know, or quick to do. We have to understand how it works first, and then we know all the advantage of having Corpora tools in class or to prepare our teaching activities, but it's something that takes some time to be used and to know how it works. And we are also working on developing activities in Portuguese and Spanish with DDL. This is the course that Dr. Crosswaite has in the University of Queensland that we are going to use now in UNESP and in our teacher training programs. There is one of our PhD students who has translated his course to Portuguese so that instructors not only of English but Portuguese and Spanish will also have access on this course and how DDL works. And so I think I'm heading to my final considerations. This is one of our recent publications in which we have different chapters talking about using Corpora in language classes and translation classes. So we have had positive results by using DDL as part of our units or lessons in secondary level and higher education. We are currently working on DDL activities for reading comprehension classes, Spanish classes, and Portuguese classes. And we are comparing how the sustainable development goals are being discussed in research papers and in popular science articles. So how are they being publicized in Brazilian community and by our university? Now, why using the theme sustainable development goals in class? In Brazil, because we still see things like this, people who are hungry in a country where we have a huge production of meat, we have soy, we have everything. So why do we have this in our country, right? We are still struggling to get people vaccinated, and it's a work that has been done by health professionals, instructors, educators, researchers, but there is a part of society that does not believe in vaccine yet. But we are a young nation. There are many young students who want to study, who want to do something for the country. So we believe that we have to bring these topics to class so that they become aware on how different countries are dealing with the issues from the Sustainable Development Goals. We have hydroelectric plants, but we also have deforestation and burning forest. We have beautiful biodiversity, and we also have young children who want to study and want to do something for society. So that's why it's important to talk about those topics in our classes. So I want to thank you very much. This is the view from my window at the university, and these are my references. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paula. And the comments that have been coming through in the chat have been the most positive comments of any of the talks that we've had so far. The enthusiasm from the audience has been absolutely fantastic. And I think it's really amazing that all of the different initiatives that you've been doing with the participants in Brazil, working with lots of different people, lots of different software applications, lots of different targets. I mean, this is exactly what those people who are working on DDL want to see. They want to see this engagement with Corpora for not just kind of learning language or for academic writing or something quite dry like that, but for really understanding something that is going to change people's lives enormously. And I think that's a really kind of a testament to what you're doing with these people. And I think it's as I struggled initially, again when I read the title and about how are you going to link data-driven learning to sustainable development and ending hunger and all of these different goals, and you're really working on that in a really interesting way, and it's a beautiful application of applied linguistics, like really applied linguistics. So I think the level of inspiration from everybody, including myself and those in the chat, is really very, very high. So what I'm going to do here is to end the recording for the people who are going to be viewing online and on YouTube later, and then we'll open it up for questions. Just before I do that, I'm just going to share my screen to promote the next talk, which is by Dr. Adrian Otaiano from the State University of Sao Paulo. which I've been informed by Dr. Tony Berber-Sardina that I gave the name of the wrong university at the beginning. That must happen all the time. So I apologize that it happened this time during your talk. But yes, I've got the correct university this time, not Sao Paulo University. And it even, this is where I got
Paula State
confused.
University.
It says University of Sao Paulo, but you have the State University of Sao Paulo, UNESP. So we have next week on a Thursday slot for the 4th of November. Again, same time as this slot on Dr. Adrian Otiano, and this time on applications of corporate DDL and phraseology in the development of collocational and phraseological competence. So again, a really interesting topic, one that is going to be looking at languages other than English, in this case Portuguese, and thinking about multilingual collocations, dictionaries, corpora, and DDL. So do tune in for that. Now I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks to everybody watching online.
Thank
And
you
then
as
we
well.
will open it up for Q&A.